2026 provides an opportunity to deliver even more progressive wins this November. Join us this summer ahead of the midterms by investing in the Progress Texas Summer Sustaining Donor Drive, funding pro-democracy, pro-justice, progressive messaging made by Texans for Texans. At Progress Texas, we're asking our supporters to become monthly donors, and for those already on the team, to increase their monthly support. Because with your partnership, we can get the message out across Texas in this critical year. We'll thank you with perks for progress. Choose from our exclusive Resist coffee mug, a Progress Texas summer koozie, or a progressive button pack. Plus, you'll get a shout out on the Daily Dispatch. Thanks in advance for doing your part to build the progressive Texas we all want to live in today.
Hey, Chris Hollins here, and I'm a huge fan of Progress Texas because you're a voice for the progressive movement across our great state.
It's Thursday, August 20th, 2026, and this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. We can't do what we do without your support. Huge thanks to Lisa Batson, Linda Melanson, and Jacqueline Stewart for their ongoing sustaining partnership. Our very own Tatum Owens moderated a great talk with a bunch of super sharp public education advocates on this podcast feed this week. That's a couple of clicks back now, but one key stat that jumped out at me from Texas AFT President Zeph Capo: under the 30-year Republican regime, Texas has dropped from regular top 10 national rankings to almost the bottom in those rankings, a result of direct, deliberate neglect of our public schools. Texans of all political stripes are deeply worried about what this means for our kids, but our top-level officials have apparently not gotten the memo, starting with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick here, who somehow thinks that banning books is still a winning talking point. In full church lady mode, Alejandra Serrano at the Texas Tribune says Lieutenant Dan has announced plans to push through legislation that directly penalizes public school districts who fail to purge books challenged as, quote, filthy, dirty, vulgar books, unquote, from their libraries. Under Patrick's proposed measure, districts keeping targeted titles on their shelves would suffer an immediate penalty, a full letter grade reduction on their official state performance rankings, which of course says the quiet part out loud. Using potential state takeovers as a threat over library books illustrates that those takeovers are not for the benefit of kids or schools. They're a punishment for local governments who don't toe the regime's ideological line and fold to their political censorship. Such a legislative move would further expand upon state encroachment into local education standards as found in Senate Bill 13, which shifted book review authority to school boards. Educators and literacy advocates and professional library organizations continue to emphasize with exasperation that trained librarians follow local policies and that parents already maintain the right to guide their own children's reading without a nanny state imposing broad bans on all students. To beat a dead horse here, elections have consequences, and we have a choice. State Rep and Democratic nominee for Lieutenant Governor Vicki Goodwin has consistently voiced opposition to this kind of political overreach into Texas's public classrooms. Not to be outdone, Governor Greg Abbott is continuing to squeeze blood from the turnip of Texas public schools as well, singling out Austin and El Paso's school districts for punching this time. Lawrence Mower at the Houston Chronicle says that out on the campaign trail this week, the governor has begun calling for targeted financial audits of Texas school districts to root out supposed administrative bloat, demanding that districts spend at least 70% of their funds directly in the classroom. For those of us who've been paying attention, Abbott's latest attack on our local schools and students ignores a glaring and multifaceted hypocrisy. A state audit also released this week reveals that Abbott's own Texas Education Agency, or TEA, is itself in violation of state law, operating an illegally top-heavy management structure. TEA's executive costs have soared 64% in recent years, even as our state's per-student funding is ranked near the rock bottom nationally. Further, Greg Abbott threatens to penalize underfunded districts like Austin and El Paso ISDs while he and Republican state lawmakers refuse to address the underlying reality. In Texas, we are already deliberately penny-pinching our public schools to death. Again, that dead horse. Elections have consequences. Greg Abbott's Democratic challenger Gina Hinojosa has pledged to actually fully fund our public schools, boost teacher pay, replace the bloated leadership at TEA, put a stop to punitive state ISD takeovers, reform campus accountability ratings, and pull the plug on Greg Abbott's private school voucher scam. Just a few weeks removed from the Texas Democratic Party convention in Corpus Christi, there are new insights on the continuing water crisis in the sparkling city by the sea that show it's not just a local problem. Once again, it's a matter of poor management under 3 decades of Republican rule. Alejandro Martinez of the Texas Tribune explains that the hole Corpus Christi finds itself in can be tied directly to decades of poor planning based upon our state water plan, which is updated every 5 years to try to forecast potential water supply and demand 50 years into the future, but ignores the scientifically proven realities of climate change and progressively worsening droughts, instead prioritizing historical data. And these forecasts were quite literally looking back, not forward. The brand new Texas 2036 water report indicates this process has already failed communities like Corpus Christi, which continues facing a looming and catastrophic water crisis, with other communities across Texas teetering on the same brink. Updating our state water plan's methodology would cost a relatively modest $4.7 million, and in fact, voters recently approved $1 billion for water projects, but none of that was allocated towards the updating of this all-important water supply modeling. That move is consistently resisted by Republican lawmakers who prefer to keep their heads in the sand. When it comes to our water future, Texas is willfully flying blind. And finally, y'all, wrapping our Thursday talk on a note of hope here, there are growing signs that rural Texas is waking up to all this bad management that's become the hallmark of our state government under the likes of Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick. Folks out in the country are up in arms about data centers and new electrical transmission lines. Stacey Webb at Politico says longtime reliably Republican rural Texans are increasingly expressing frustration over the loss of local control, environmental concerns, strain on water supplies and power grids, and state legislative preemption that has stopped their local officials from regulating or halting these tech developments that infringe directly upon their private property rights. That's sacred territory in rural Texas. As we've talked about, Governor Abbott has tried to hold this off, issuing a largely empty directive pausing new grid approvals for data centers, but Texans out there aren't stupid. They know a political gesture and delay tactic when they see one. Webb notes also that some folks in small town and rural Texas also haven't forgotten how Greg Abbott ran over their local elected Republican lawmakers who dared to defy the governor's plan to undermine their local schools with private school vouchers. Polling reflects a distinct decline in Abbott's approval rating among rural voters in Texas. His lead over Gina Hinojosa has gotten quite thin out there. The optimism here is cautious, as always, but we've begun to believe a reckoning for Greg Abbott and his party may be on the way out in the beautiful and spacious Texas countryside. Houston listeners, the next episode of our In Progress Roundtable show comes to you on the radio on KPFT 90.1 FM at 6:30 p.m. today and every Thursday. And San Antonio listeners, it's on in your town at the same time this afternoon at 6:30 on Empower House Radio 101.5 FM. With your support, we hope to continue to expand our radio footprint across Texas this year. Click the link in the show notes to make your tax-deductible donation to help us reach new audiences via Texas radio. This election year, you can support the real free press by investing in pro-democracy, pro-justice, progressive storytelling delivered by Texans for Texans. Join Progress Texas this summer ahead of the midterms and become a monthly donor today or increase your giving during our summer sustaining donor drive. With your partnership, we can reach more independents, progressives, and young voters, all of whom must be mobilized to win elections this fall. And we'll thank you with Perks for Progress, your choice from an exclusive Resist coffee mug, a sweet Progress Texas summer koozie, and a progressive button pack. Plus, you'll get a shout-out on the Daily Dispatch like this one for congressional candidate Danny Minton, who you'll hear here on the podcast feed this weekend. Danny, we appreciate the support. We wish you all the best in your race in Congressional District 6. If you're listening in Arlington, Mansfield, Waxahachie, or Corsicana, that's likely your ballot. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for this Thursday, August 20th, 2026. Links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. Learn more about what we do and how you can get involved at progresstexas.org. I'm Chris Mosier. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day. We'll see you again here tomorrow morning.